Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. This is episode number 35 of Project Kids. I'm in a different location. Michael is in a different location. Laura is at the usual location and maybe piping in. This is going to be a little bit of a different show today. Michael, good morning. How are you?
I'm well. Ladies, how are you?
Well, I'm okay. I'm in, as I was telling you before we started, last minute, unexpected trip to Los Angeles to try and catch my mom on the way out. So, I don't, I've been ready for this for a long time, but you never, like when it comes, it's interesting. But when we got here yesterday and we went to my mom and, it didn't really look very good when we got there, but by the end of our visit, she was awake and attempting to communicate and interacting. So apparently she had been kind of out of it or comatose sort of for a couple of days. So I don't know. Once she starts eating and starts moving around like a little bit, then you don't know. Then things seem to start to seem a little different. So I don't actually know what's going on. But
Okay.
I'm here. I mean, she's in a bed, right? She's in her bed. My mom has dementia and she has been fading progressively over the last several years, but it took a sharper turn this year. And apparently she kind of just stopped getting out of bed the other day and then stopped eating and couldn't walk anymore. And so they had the hospice brought like a bed and she's been in bed for a couple of days, basically like not in a coma, but like not really responsive, just laying down with her eyes closed. And if you hold something up to her mouth, she'll like a little spoonful of yogurt or applesauce. She'll take a little bit, but not talking and not really doing anything. But once my sister and I were there for about an hour, suddenly she was opening her eyes and smiling at us and whatnot. So like, I'm not sure I'm clear on what her condition or state is. It's difficult to look at, to see her like this. But if I said I actually knew what was going on, I wouldn't be telling the truth because I don't. So yeah, so I'm here with my sister. And we're going to be here this week, just so regardless of whatever it is that's going on, we got some time with her. So that's what's going on. How are you?
Right. Well, I'm good. I'll go to me in a moment. What I think is interesting, like, we do this thing, and it's impossible to do this thing that we do without a part of recognition that like there are people watching this. This isn't just me, the three of us having a conversation. This is the three of us having a conversation with witnesses. And there is a very palpable change in the energy level, and obviously so, like, I mean, you just explained the situation, like, what you're feeling inside, but everything also, like, just traveling last night. So I know that today's going to be, today's a special show for us because it's different. And I just wanted to recognize that. And then also, that's going to be, I think we're going to see, we'll probably go to some different places because you and me, I think Laura and I are probably going to be playing off of the state which you're in. You're setting the tone. And so we're going to go to some interesting places today is my sense. And I appreciate, you mentioned in the beginning, you said that you canceled almost all of your other events, which you do online, but you kept this, and I'm grateful for that. And also, like, all of us being able to go and have this piece of you at this unique time for you in your life, that's a gift as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I felt like, well, first, I felt like this would be helpful for me stabilizing, but also I miss you because I think now we're only doing shows once a month. And this month we didn't really have a lot of phone calls or texts otherwise, which we normally do. Just things that we travel. Laura and I did some traveling before this and just things have been busy. So it was like, no, I think it's important for us to come together and do this, but also you and I share of ourselves on this show. And it seems that a lot of times when we're having an experience or going through something or whatever, then it meets other people where they're at. And so I felt like
Right.
it was important to do that for myself and for us, but also for other people, because I know a lot of people are losing people at this time, or if they're not actually gone, they're gone in the sense that they knew them before in life, whether it be to health or other things. So yeah. So thank you for being here and doing it with me. I appreciate that.
All right. So I don't even remember what was the last time we spoke was when I was I in Allentown? Is that where was that it? Was that the last conversation? I
Yeah,
think
well,
so.
yeah, you were in Allentown, and then we talked some about dark, and we got into it seems a long time ago. Maybe Laura can bring up
It was
the
a
show
long time
notes.
ago.
No, it was the yeah, we talked about we did it was like the we talked about the series Dark, and then we talked about a couple of other things in the second hour. We talked about Perodos. We talked about the Austin
Ooh,
beer,
yes.
right, and the user experience and all of this kind of stuff. And then yeah, so that was what we were talking about. And then I think we had a few text exchanges after that, but then we haven't really spoken much since then. And there's been some interesting things going on for sure.
All
Um,
right.
but
Let me ask this. My memories, I'm blending a couple of memories in my mind, and I'm not certain if you and we have not had a conversation with me in the new house. Is that a correct statement?
correct, you were in an
Okay.
Airbnb. You were in an
Okay,
Airbnb.
all right, okay. So now I know. So because I've done a bunch of recordings since I've been here, I couldn't recall if it was with you or not. So all right, so I
Okay.
know. I'm just trying to think where I need to bring you up to speed. Why don't we just start if you want to work backwards,
Yeah, let's check in and see what else is going on, and then maybe in the second hour, maybe we can talk a little bit about my mom, because I think my mom is a character worth exploring
right.
on a variety of levels. But let's just catch up with each other and sort of see where each one is at and where things want to go on their own, and then yeah, and then we can talk a little bit about my mom in the second hour. So let's fill us in,
Okay.
Michael. It's,
You want me to?
when is Michael Wann?
When
Where,
is Michael
when?
Wann?
Yeah, right. So I titled the last episode, not where, but when. And then somebody chimed in, isn't it really who also? Right.
Hold
So,
on. The last time we spoke was 12/27. So that was the day.
yeah.
Because did I talk? Because that was when I had I signed the lease for the place which I'm staying in right now. So you're right. So I wouldn't have been in this house.
No, you were in an Airbnb. You were like doing some house, and then you were going to go house sitting, or you were doing some of that kind of stuff.
Right. So okay. I mean, that seems so long ago. So that day, 12/27, I know that day as being significant because I signed the lease for the place which I'm staying in right now. And that was also the anniversary date of my 8-time great grandfather marrying my 8-time great grandmother, 12/27, which was which occurred less than 5 miles away from where this house is. So there was that time space continuum. And then since then, I guess there were two different things. And I guess maybe I'll start from that date. I did not move in. So you met Christy previously. So Christy and I are in this home together. And she grew up. So it's so friggin' weird. This is
Where are
so
you?
friggin' weird.
What city
It's
are you? Where are you?
it's like imagine this. Go in your mind and say, picture Nowhereville. Picture where is Nowhereville, Pennsylvania? And that's where I am. That's where I am. It's probably the closest town. The closest town is called Boyertown. Maybe 6,000 or 7,000 people. That might be a big number. South of Allentown, Allentown, the closest big city. So, all right, maybe 5 or 6 miles away. I'll pull up a map in a moment, I suppose. Maybe I should do that right now. Let me see.
I was just going to pull up a map, but you're super dexterous with the map, so you go ahead and pull it
Yeah,
up.
and I would be able to pull up. So, all right, I did this search just the other day. Someone wanted to know about like Raven Rock, which I know we've talked about before. So, all right, so so this is where it gets really strict. So this is the alignment of this
And there's
place.
good old
So,
Camp
all right.
Airy down there. I saw good old Camp Airy, one of our
Exactly. Right.
yeah.
Right. I was doing yeah, it is cold. I have that turned off because the fan's so loud. Yeah. All right. So my internet is slow, as you could see how
I
it's
can see
taking a
that.
moment for
Yes.
this to load, right? All right. So now we got it. So now it's starting to load, it looks like. So oh, what did that do? I didn't want to do that. Let me just do this. And there. So, there.
Wood chopper
So
town. I love it. Bechtel.
right.
Oh, you're oh, there's all kind of there's lots of stuff to mine here. Go ahead.
Right. So this is Lancaster right here. I was in Quarryville.
Okay.
Right here's like Philadelphia is this area right here. This is Allentown. So it's this tiny little town right here, Boyertown. This is Reading.
Okay.
This is Pottstown. So Pottstown is like the closest like big town. Pottstown is like this real kind of like it's a depressed in multiple sense of the words, at least my opinion would be how I would describe Pottstown. Real kind of like, working class sort of place. But what I find so interesting about Pottstown is located within it is a elite boarding school, like one of like, I don't know how familiar you are with the elite boarding schools of the East Coast, but the Hill School, which is a feeder to like Princeton and Yale and Harvard, like that's located right in the middle of Pottstown, which is seemingly out of place. Pottstown is also home to where it said Martin Luther King wrote his I Have a Dream speech while staying at a farm in Pottstown. But anyway, so here I'm in Boyertown. Actually, it's outside of Boyertown is where this house is. But what's so interesting about this is I already indicated I could maybe pull it up on another tab, but not only is this place where I'm located significant to the Wann family line as this is where my great grandfather to the 8th time, like where they came when they arrived in the New World about 10 years ago. Back when I was making a lot of art and doing a lot of shows, I was asked to participate in this, to have like a month-long show in a gallery. And all I remember in my memory is that it was in the middle of nowhere. And I had no idea why I agreed to do it, but I did it. I drove all my art, set the whole thing up in this gallery. It was up there for a month. And then I came back a month later, 30 days later, and I took everything down. I mean, that's all what's in my memory. It was this town. It's this town. Like, I mean, there's this bizarreness of like this, it's incredibly magnetized to me, both like personally from like family line, but then personally from my own experience in this body. So for whatever reason, I keep getting pulled back here. Now, Christy actually grew up in this town, where it gets even stranger. I didn't even know that. I didn't even realize that when we moved in here. I didn't know that her childhood home was so close to it. So there's all of these like connections of for me and her to being here in this house that was built in the 1790s. And so many, and a lot of weird things have been in the house, have occurred in the house so far, but I'm going to pause right now and I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask questions or to like point things out or anything along those lines right now.
Okay, so I do think it's fascinating that you got that you had your art there for a month, right? And then you kind of have never given it a second thought since then, and then you're pulled back here sort of now because of how sort of precognitive your art has been in a lot of the stories and you know, sort of synchromysticism thread that we do here. So I'm curious about like the what kind of experiences are awaiting you that have been directed by the fact that your art sat there for that period of time, right? So I'm curious about that going forward to see if that sort of materializes anything. But how did you, so like the last time you were doing some house sittings, you were staying at an Airbnb in Allentown, and like there didn't seem to be a clear, oh, okay, our plan is to move to this place. And how did you end up, like I guess there was a part of me that thought maybe you were going to hit the road. You guys were going to do some carny some carny experiences or whatever. How did this become the next step?
So this is first off, it's only like we signed a lease for 4 months. Like it's not even really a lease, but an agreement to be here.
Okay.
And it kind of we were looking for like maybe having at least some sort of like a home base, if you will. And this place kind of presented itself again in a very sort of like how it unfolded and who the people were involved in an unusual sort of way. It wasn't part of the plan. It just kind of happened. Is you are correct about that. I want to go back to the house sitting because this feels like it ties in to your mother. But even before I get to that, today's January 24th. The 27th, January 27th, marks the 1-year anniversary of the Masonic presentation. All right.
Okay. Yep.
So I'm coming up on a year. And last week I was invited. Do you know there's a podcaster? He goes by the name of Recluse.
Yes, I've heard
He's
him.
been on Higher Chats.
Yeah, I've heard him
Do you
before.
know him?
I don't know him
So
personally.
I met up with him.
Yeah. I've only ever heard him
with
on Greg's show, and I know that I think my friend John Brisson might be friends with him as well. He talks about him as well. But yeah, I know.
Yeah, like John Brisson makes a lot of sense that they would be friends. So I don't really know him, but I know him by reputation, I suppose. He had some questions about the area for me, and Mark Steves put us together. This was in December. And then he was planning an event to go to Rose Valley, which is a very, very strange artists commune outside of Philadelphia. And we had this meetup 2 weeks ago. It was me, him, Mark, this other guy by the name of Henry Clay, who's also a researcher, like a top tattoo artist in Philadelphia, another guy. We go to the museum at this Rose Valley, and we have this private tour, and it was the most David Lynch experience, like cast of characters, like myself included, like everyone is just weird as fuck. Like weird looking, like weird interests, the guides, like everything about it. So like that's been the flavor of the day. Like everything, like this feels like the last month has felt like a David Lynch movie of characters and strangeness and macabre and like, what is really occurring. So that happened like 2 weeks ago. Now I'm going to go back 2 weeks before that and the house sitting situation. I think I alluded a little bit to you about this last time we spoke. And it was, let me where are we? Hold on for a sec. But I was house sitting, or actually we both were, and we house sat for a pretty well-known individual. And it was for this. So the house sitting was like the woman. She takes care of her father, her elderly father, and she was going on a vacation, and she needed not only house sitting but also some care for her father, who's in the latter stages of life. And it's this gentleman, James Prescott, who was a health scientist administrator at the National Institutes of Health from 1966 to 1980. So the National Institutes of Health, like this is like, you know, we're talking like we're bumping into John Lilyland, and this guy was like a chief administrator, like he like enough of a person to like have a Wikipedia page, you know, that sort of individual. You could see, so taking care of this man who's like maybe suffering from some cognitive decline. You know, I want to be respectful to his privacy, I suppose, but I found myself like in this place, like learning about him, like looking at like the bookshelf, or which was for him, and the books he had written, and like cross-referencing like time and place and organizations. And so finding that sort of experience, and then like, you know, that came right after this occurrence of signing the lease 5 miles from where my great grandparents got married 56 years earlier, like so much stuff. And then doing this Rose Valley sort of thing, like that's really been my last month.
So we talked a little bit about that gentleman last time, and I'll be interested in just a minute to hear about sort of your impressions after spending a little bit of time there with him and whatnot. But couple things, you know why it's all David Lynchian, don't you? Because remember when well, just we talked about last time, we were supposed to record the first one on Sunday, but I'm launching into a series called Dark Matter with Chris and Hunter from The Melt that will be a revisiting of Twin Peaks. Like we're going to go through and really pluck at the prescient themes, and, you know, like it's, you know, it's that's a series that's never going to be run out of. You know, people from here till time immemorial will have reflections and take a look back at that series, right? And we decided that we were going to do it because so many things, he's really super into that. We're going to have guests that were on the series Twin Peaks. I know that they had mentioned it to you, what we were doing, and you were like, oh, maybe I'll chime in. But we've been talking quite a bit about Twin Peaks.
I would love to. I just don't have the internet connection.
Yeah.
I wanted to do that, really participate. I just don't have the I don't have the internet capability of watching it here.
Yeah. So, but we've been very, very Twin Peaks focused. It's come up in a number of shows with different people. What's funny is, like I was telling Rob, we were out to dinner with Robert and Joan this past weekend. And I was telling him, and he's like, oh, did you know that today was David Lynch's birthday? And he was telling me about this like very strange video that David Lynch, you know, posted for his birthday that I'm not going to talk about here because it's a little bit wild. But, you know, there seems to be something up in the air right now with just the tone of things. A lot of people are sort of talking about Twin Peaks again. I did notice that, you know, one of David Lynch's main focuses has in all of his programming, but particularly in Twin Peaks, has been around coffee, right? And one of, I don't know if you ever saw that Everything Everywhere All at Once, but one of the clues that you were not in the same place you were the day before is if the coffee is different. Well, when last week we decided to look up David Lynch's coffee, and David Lynch's coffee doesn't exist in this reality anymore. Like he was selling coffee for a while. Like I remember they sold the David Lynch coffee at the market that I like to shop at here. The only information I could find about David Lynch's coffee online now is somebody saying that, like, all of a sudden, like about a year ago, his website started doing weird things, and then now nobody can find his coffee anymore, right? So maybe he's leaving us coffee clues as to what's going on, but we're rewatching it. And, you know, I watched the series, the first part of the series when it first came out in 1989. And then like a year and a half or 2 years ago, we rewatched that and then watched the third season. And obviously the early part of the show meant something completely different to me now than it did when I was 14, because I have an entire world of experience and new sets of knowledge and whatnot. But now, like, so then it was kind of like going through it again with fresh eyes. now that I know more, and then the season 3 was completely different because it was, 20 years later or 30 years later, and the topics were really quite different. But now that I'm not experiencing that whole thing for the first time, you go back and you start to look at the episodes, you're picking up on much more. Whenever you rewatch a movie or a series, you start to pick up certain little things that either you didn't notice the time before or you didn't recognize the meaning of them. And it's quite interesting to do. So we'll be doing that show with them over the course of this year. We're going to sort of stretch it out and really sort of dig into a variety of things. The show lines up really well with a couple of like theories and narratives that I have about things that I think that are going on, about certain locations. And I know what's great about that show is like everybody can have their own narrative for it, and they all can sort of make sense if you can tell the story well enough. But I'm going to be making the case for Twin Peaks as Chatsworth, right? and it's kind of been fun to show Laura like why I think so as we're watching it, and she's like, "Oh wow, that's interesting. It is kind of alike." But there's a lot of focus on David Lynch right now. A lot of people are talking about this in the background. And when I brought up that I was going to be doing a series, a lot of people are like, "Oh, let's do that. That sounds great." Like they're really they like the idea of revisiting that at this time for whatever reason. So it would only make sense that would play out in your life as well, because that's just how it works. Like the things that are going on in your life affect what's going on in my life and vice versa. So welcome
and so what I think is what I'm going to say is even interesting. So I'm going to go. Let's play with this. So I was on the melt. I was on the melt. I recorded the melt when I was I was house sitting. So I was in the house. I was house sitting, and I recorded the melt. And Chris, like he threw out the idea, like it was a great conversation. He's like, "Hey, do you want to participate in this like David Lynch thing?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, definitely. I've never seen it. I think it'll be a lot of fun." But that was before I realized that there's no internet access here. The only thing I have is like hotspot sort of stuff, and that's iffy at best. And it's in this one room which has no heat. Okay. And it just didn't work out. Like, I mean, it's like the amount of the effort in order to make that work. Like, I'm like, I don't know if that's going to happen. And like, I don't want to go into, there's a variety of reasons where I'm like, that's not going to participate. And there's part of me, which is a little bit like, I would have liked to have done that because I'm aware of David Lynch. As a cultural, and Twin Peaks is a cultural phenomenon. And you and I have talked about it. So like, it made sense to me, but so there's part of me, which was, which felt like, I'm missing out. I want to be part of that. So there's that. But the truth of the matter is this: I'm not part of that. I'm not part of the viewing of it. And just as you said, you and I are connected. We've got this like really interesting feedback loop in our lives. So what I am noticing is like, my life is becoming more of like a David Lynch show, like you can't imagine. Like it's the past year has always been that, like moving to Baltimore, like moving to like to like the Amish countryside, like strangeness, like outside of like normal like there's no Whole Foods anywhere. There's no like, I don't have like this mainstream reality right now. And I'm like, my life is becoming David Lynch. Like this, I got to send you, I'll try to text you. I mentioned Recluse. Like Recluse is one of the most unique looking individuals I've ever met. And like, we're at this, the woman who gave us this tour in Rose Valley, we just did this recording for his podcast. So like a post-mortem of it. And she was like maybe 70 years old. And she speaks in this like way people don't talk anymore. Like this old world, very well-to-do affluent, like, "Yes, darling," and like that sort of stuff. Like no one is, and her name was Marston, and like, and she's like giving us this tour, and she's talking about like the sort of things that would be interesting to a woman of means who's like 75 years old. And she was also like, she's talking about like, "Is it time for martinis yet?" Like that sort of thing. Like it was like and Recluse, like he just like his voice is so like, it's like deep and commanding, and he like he's like dressed in a very, like, I dress peculiarly, I suppose, but he is like even like in a different type of peculiarity, like with his big belt buckle, and the belt buckle is just the number 23. It's just the number 23, and that's his belt buckle. And like he's got, like, he's all in blue, like blue jeans and a blue denim shirt, buttoned up all the way with the 23 like belt buckle, and these huge black shoes, and like this tied tight around his neck, this medicine bag. And like like the people don't realize, like I come to realize this afterwards, like he invited all of us to come along as cover because he was doing like deep research into like something about Rose Valley, but he needed other people there, like not to. And so we're there, and like the sort of like questions he was asking, because they were giving us, we were interested in Rose Valley as a Rosicrucian / like underworld secret lodge. But Rose Valley on the surface is like an arts and crafts community from like the early 1900s. Maybe it was like the 1800s. I don't recall. And so all they were talking about, the tour guides, was this like arts and crafts community. And he was able to ask like these really, really important, like, obvious, like, questions that would only come from someone who was very knowledgeable about that movement. And so like I'm watching all that, and you got like me, and then you got Mark, who's like 6'10", wearing like handmade clothes, and then like the tattoo artist, and like, I mean, it was a freaking David Lynch thing. And then all that being said, this house is haunted. Like weird things have occurred. Like this heater, which we have to use to heat the house, is this like like literally it's a Czechoslovakian like wood burning thing, which is to heat like the water tank for radiators. And there's a dead chicken down there now. Like they brought a chicken in, and the chicken died. And I'm like, this is a little bit too like hoodoo voodoo for me to have a dead chicken next to like this like strange, like people are getting locked into rooms where doors are mysteriously locking. Like the whole thing is a David Lynch film. So let me go and tie this back into what I was saying. I think the reason I'm not watching the show is because I'm living the show, and you guys are like, the witness.
So it's interesting that you have a Czechoslovakian radiator heater kind of weird thing. We have a special.
It's the firebox. Like it's like, imagine a normal radiator. Like how a radiator works is like this. Like you got a big water tank and so forth, but somehow that needs to get heated up. And there's like more modern ways in which that's done. We've got to build a fire in this firebox, and it's like there's a lot of clunks to it. It's clunky, and it's this firebox is Czechoslovakian. That's what it is.
We have a special Czechoslovakian listener. I'm not going to say her name, but she knows who she is. So you know her as well, Michael. So hello. If you know anything about these heater boxes, you can fill us in. But
I'm like reading it in the manual. Like I'm reading where it was built. It's built in Slovakia, so it's not, it's since like the fall. Yes. I just like to say Czechoslovakia because it's a fun word to say. But yes, like I mean, it like everything in this house just feels like it does, like it's a bleed over from this other dimension.
Well, I think as you were talking, I was thinking about like there could be a connection between said strange heater box, water radiator thing, and the locking doors. I've noticed whenever I live in old places that have radiator kind of heat, like when I lived in New York, right, that the doors would do that, because when you're using like a water heating system like that, I think things expand. And like the wood, when you're in a wood structure with wood and things are moist and hot and they expand and then they shrink down, I think the old door locks and stuff get, the doors get stuck.
That's not the case. That's not the case for this place. One, it doesn't get very hot. It's like, that's why I've got so many layers on. But two, when this happened, like the owner of the house is like, this has never occurred before. Like usually it's completely the opposite. Like it was the bathroom. Like people, Christy and her daughter got locked into the bathroom. It's normally the other way around. The bathroom door won't stay shut, much less the locking mechanism would never even work. Somehow, not only did it lock, it would not unlock. And it took like 30 minutes for it to be able to be picked from the inside. Like it's strange. And the owner of the house is like, this has never happened before.
Okay, I want to take a look at this Rose Valley place.
All right.
So I'm going to pull it up in just a second. So first of all, so the way that you were, so Recluse is looking at it as like he's looking for the secret lodge, the hidden lodge, and the cover story on top.
And I don't want to speak out of turn I don't want to speak out of turn. That may not be an accurate. That was my general
That's your
statement
sense
of how I understand.
That's your sense of things, right? And then the cover story for this is now like Michael and I making up our own reality about this place, is that there's this artist colony, right? So I think I think one of the things that's happening through the work that I do with you and as well with other people, but I think that will become part of the narrative of the special about Twin Peaks, is really starting to sort of hammer or nail down like what the factors are at some of these locations, right? Like, and I think once you, I mean, is the secret or hidden lodges, like in my head, it's like these are locations where there's a hole in the ground, a facility, or a particle accelerator, or where there is something going on there that creates this sort of crossover of timelines or dimensions or whatever it is. And there's people who are there because they work at said facility, and then they have this awareness that other things go on as well, and they spend time in their own personal social life, i.e. their gentlemen's clubs, discussing this, doing other things with the things that they know based on the job that they have or whatnot. And then they also, I think, want to attract certain types of people to that location because if my feeling about this is correct, is that it's different people with different sort of personality characteristics, genetic characteristics, all kinds of things, factors will sort of experience the phenomena of that location differently. And right. So you want, like, if you're trying to, map out an overlapped reality, or you're trying to explore as many places as the tunnel might take you to, or whatever it is, right? You're looking for good candidates to either participate in said experiences inside or outside of their awareness, or B, generate the energy field that allows you to have those experiences, because everybody comes with their own unique Wi-Fi, right? Their own unique energy field that they're broadcasting. Now, artists are particularly open and okay to sets of experiences that other people, even if they had like the same genetics, right? Like if you've got siblings, that one is some weird hippy dippy artist and the other is just like, accountant who went to the economics school at so-and-so. Now, they might have weird interests, but in general, that person is going to be looking for more of a standard provable version of reality, whereas artist is going to be open to all kinds of magical thinking or whatever it is, right? And so you want to attract people that are going to be not put off by strange experiences if they're either having them or generating them, right? That are going to be able to make creativity based on that can then serve as like the symbolism or the memorialization of some of this kind of thing that can sort of build the mystery, build the lore, build the legend, right? But also it allows for there to be unusual interactions. It attracts other people who maybe aren't wanting to live there full time, but people with money, or said normal person is actually a brilliant engineer and who will come visit his sister here. And there may be some separate thing that happens when he's in the reality too, but people are passing through, and it attracts a certain kind of energy that is probably the most beneficial for like whatever thing they're trying to have go on, right? It creates a cover, but it also invites a certain select group of people in. And some people will just like the arts and crafts portion of it and come there for their long weekend and buy tchotchkes to bring home. But other people will be willing to wander off into the mystery if they observe something unusual while they're there. It's very similar to like a town of Twin Peaks or whatever it is. There's obviously people there who are just working at the mill and that's their day-to-day life or whatever it is, and the waitresses working at the diner. But then there seems to be some of this other unusual stuff going on there based around the natural beauty of the location, and there's these odd characters, and it seems to be a place where, you know, gentlemen go to engage in all sorts of behavior that would be considered, you know, somewhat illicit. But there seems to be everybody there is a little bit weird. There's not like one person who's part of the show who's just like completely normal, right? And so it allows for a lot of flexibility of reality without anybody going, well, something's wrong.
Definitely. Like I think that's a great way of framing it up.
So yeah, but I think that this is, even if you look at in Twin Peaks, the art on the walls and all the places is like that. It's kind of, I forget the name of the art, but my dad had some of it. It's like something you see in the Pacific Northwest from some of the indigenous. It's a very, I don't know what it's called. It's a very specific looking, it's in Alaska, it's in Washington. But it almost seems like the hotel there is like a gallery for some of that kind of art, right? And so that sort of brings that as part of the focus as well. Not all small towns have like an artistic aesthetic in the way that.
So when you say the hotel there, do you mean Twin Peaks?
It's called the Great Northern. In the series, it's called the Great Northern, I think is the name of it.
The Great Northern.
Yeah, I think that's the name of the hotel in Twin Peaks. I think hotel in Twin Peaks. I think it's called the Great Northern. Twin Peaks. It would be great if I could spell. All right. So it's it's this place here. I'll do the screen sharing because my computer works faster than yours does.
Right.
Okay. So like this is the right. This is the location. But it has like all of this interesting woodworking, right, that you actually see in a lot of these old places in Chatsworth as well. But see this art on the wall here? See that? That's the kind of art I'm talking about.
Right.
You can see the mural better there, a little bit bigger, but there's like other stuff with that on it in there as well. There's definitely like an aesthetic that goes along with, and then you got some of this stuff in there. Like a lot of the rooms have that type of thing. There's another one, right? But no, I mean, I think this is, you know, I think probably it was a smart move on Recluse's part to do it the way he did it, right? And that person who was the tour guide is probably a certain form of gatekeeper. She probably understood
without a doubt
what she was.
And she was third generation Rose Valley.
Right. That's what these like ladies who come from these families are often docents at museums or curators at galleries, right?
Exactly.
And they have the standard tour that they give to the people who are standard, right? And then they have the weird tour that they'll give to people who are weirder. Or then there's the other thing that is sort of like the posing questions type of tour, right? Like, you know, say certain things just to see, like the probing tour, right? To sort of where, you know, she's checking you out.
Like,
yeah.
Everyone was feeling everyone out. She cursed me too. She literally said, I'm putting a curse on you. So let me go and show you this though. All right. So where we went, what we had a tour of was the primary like facility or the center of life at Rose Valley. It's called the Thunderbird Lodge. So as you can imagine with a name like Thunderbird Lodge, it's going to have a very strong like Native American sort of. So here's some pictures of it. And so like as you're talking about, what did you say it was called? The Great Northern?
The Great Northern, I think there's a different name for the place in real life, but in the show they call it the Great Northern.
Right, exactly. We're talking about the fictitious place. I'm not talking about like, but like what we have. So right here, and this was part of or connected directly to the Pennsylvania, an instructor from the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philadelphia. I want to just say that's where David Lynch went to school.
Interesting. Do you see what's happened? Do you see what right down here in the second paragraph? Right, they talk about the American Birth Control League, right? So this is like part of the developing and ongoing theory that I have has to do with eugenics, not so much in the sense of like we're trying to get rid of people or we're trying to create a specific race, but keeping track of people's genetics the same way you keep track of like the keys to the different apartments in your building you own or the codes to the different lockers in the high school, right? That each unique set of genetics opens up a different version of reality.
Well, you're 100% correct that this, like, that the eugenics movement and a lot of these progressive movements have a very strong tie to the Thunderbird Lodge.
Yeah. This place looks fascinating. There was also something else I noticed in there as you were rolling through.
Like, so this is what one of the fireplaces looks like. Let's see if it'll load fast enough for you to see. That's Pennsylvania Dutch. That's called a hex sign right there.
Mm-hmm.
It was walking up this. That was a tour guide. Can you see the tour guide?
I don't see a person. I think we're behind you.
Yeah, I think it's just taking a
moment.
I
see her now. I see her down at the bottom with the red jacket. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it was on this stairwell walking up. I carry with me like this handmade leather ball, and I'm really good at like manipulating it around my hand. And she threatened me. She said, if I don't stop doing that, she's going to put a curse on me. And I'm like, you can't curse me. Like I said, like it was the strangest sort of, it was so weird, the interaction. It was so like there was like 4 layers of the conversation that were occurring simultaneously.
Yeah, well, she seems like she would be a character in the Twin Peaks. She looks like she should be in a David Lynch for sure.
Everyone, I sent you, if you look on your phone, if you have that handy, I sent you a picture of the crew, like taken in the lodge, and just like look at all the characters.
All right. Let's see. Oh yeah, nope. This is definitely. That's interesting. I recognize some of the other people besides you and Mark, even though I don't know the other people.
Right. There's some sort of like weird bleed through. Like here we all look like we're in a Hobbit house too. Like we're so close to the ceiling.
Yeah. Well, you and Mark are exceptionally tall. The others are not, but yeah. Mark is so interesting looking. Anyway, yeah, no, so I definitely am picking up the vibe that you're talking about and that you're sort of putting down. I look forward to just out of curiosity, I just want to go back. Did you, while you were staying at that house with Prescott, did you pull on any of that or
okay.
Or just acknowledge that you were in sort of adjacent, in sort of proximity to him, and that was kind of it.
So, as a human being, like I'm a really good caregiver. Like I enjoy to care for people, and particularly people who need care. So like this was like hitting me in a sweet spot. Like I like this. I like being able to do that. And one night it was just me and him. The whole night, and I go in his room and we watch Fox News. No, we don't watch Fox News together. We watch MSNBC. And the thing which we watch, and so I'm like in his room and we're watching his show. And first off, I'm looking at his bookshelf. Like he's in a spare bedroom of his daughter's. And my assumption is like, probably at the peak of his intellectual and maybe financial and independent prowess, he probably had an enormous library, personal library, right? He's an academic.
Yeah.
So all he has now is like one bookshelf, like with maybe like 30 books on the shelf. So I was like, okay, this is his I'm assuming is going to be his curated, this large collection, at least where he is in like, these are the books he wants to have around him. So I went through that with a fine tooth comb. But what I thought was so interesting, what I thought was were two things: was the timing of what's going on right now. So like the whole talk on MSNBC of whatever it was that we were watching had to do with Roe versus Wade.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
And I saw like there was a book, which I think he was just the editor of. He may not have been like the author of it, but it was a published book, a published academic book. But apparently like a very, very big part of his research. I mean, I'll go into like a little bit deeper into what my thought of like what was happening in this experience was, but his research is like abortion rights and protecting abortion rights. Like he would write about it, and he was an intellectual and an expert. So I would imagine, as someone who had like that is their value system, like throughout their life, and was like a champion of the cause. Like this was the cause he believed in, and he was like, you know, writing letters to presidents and like all this sort of stuff. And then to see at the end of his life, like his worst fear, right? The worst fear of what has always been said is like, you know, the turning of Roe versus Wade at the Supreme Court level. Well, that happened, you know. So like I'm very aware of this occurring in his life. And so I tugged on that a little bit. I'm like, what is that like? You know, because I know this must be important. And he starts talking to me. And I waited to ask that question during the commercials. And I don't watch these TV shows. And what they did was they showed the same commercials in the same order. And I couldn't even believe that. I'm like, it's the repetition like you can't believe. But I waited till the commercial to ask him the question. And he started answering me the question. And then the moment the show begins, he stops talking and is 100% focused back on TV. Okay.
Yeah.
So that being said, I want to take a couple steps back because this is really interesting. His daughter, who's probably a little bit younger than me, definitely like our age, like our generation, and her area of expertise is one has to do with like ketamine, and then also with equine, which makes sense, equine therapy. Like,
Yes.
you know, that's been her experience, like using horses as like for like therapy for human beings.
Well, also ketamine is horse tranquilizer.
Exactly. So like that, they're like, that's what I meant by this, like it all interconnects. And they grew up in Bethesda. So Bethesda is where like the National Institute of Mental Health is, like all of these organizations. I grew up in Columbia, Maryland, which is adjacent. It's kind of close to Bethesda. It's not like right next door, but in between the two is going to be the NSA. And on the other side of Columbia is the Maryland Psychedelic or Psychiatric Research Center. So this is where
I think you had it right the first time. I think you had it right the first time.
Exactly, because that's where John Lilly went after he did all of his dolphin stuff down in Florida and the Caribbean. And his boss was Stan Groff. Is it Groff or Graff? I get it confused. You know who Stan Graff is?
Yeah, it's Groff, Stan Groff.
Right. So those are the two known or named individuals. This is late 60s. So like this area of the world where Columbia, which came to be birthed at that time where I was raised, where I'm like, I was like, it is a very, very logical conclusion to make when you follow the money and you follow all of the like who was there when they were there and all this. Like Columbia was a test place. It was a test place. And this guy, James Prescott, his particular interest was violence in young boys. So like, let's go even drill that back like a little bit. Like I'm thinking, like, just think about like Clockwork Orange on the surface level. Like that's about understanding like the relationship between violence and boys and psychological, like blah, blah, blah. So all of that being said, like I'm reading all of this stuff, like I'm figuring all this stuff while I'm staying out, or like going back to all of these types of thoughts while I'm staying there. And then like have you ever seen the Bourne Identity films?
I haven't seen all of them, but I've seen enough of them to understand the idea. Yes.
So they're like an MK Ultra. So the final one, or the final one with Matt Damon, has to do with him going back to where he had his initial, like, programming, and coming face to face with his programmer.
Yes, I saw that one. The
And
subborn.
I'm like, how is this not that? Like, I'm not necessarily saying all of that is in play, but archetypically, here I am with the head of the org. Like, this guy wasn't a scientist. This guy was like the head of head of a department, of a pretty big department within the National Institutes of Health. And like at the time, like where all of this stuff is happening, like all of these Project Kid things, which we're talking about. And like, here I am, I'm finding myself like in a house with him. And like, probably what was once like a very like, strong, and when I mean strong, like intellectually strong, like driven, and like probably like all of these things of like what it would take to rise to the top of a highly competitive like academic institution, and all of these different things, like, but now here he is in a place of weakness, like his cognitive capabilities are on the decline for whatever reason, he's physically frail and so forth, and I'm his caregiver for at least one night. And I'm like, this is and I'm about to step into this like David Lynch, like, I'm telling you this story in hindsight. This is before I moved into the house, which I'm in right now. And it was like just seeing all of the little details that are making up this story of like me and this guy and all of that sort of stuff. Like, he was a sweet man, or at least he was sweet in the interactions I had with him. Like, we had New Year's Eve dinner with him, and we like cracked open a bottle of champagne. Like, the whole thing was like, it was the most surreal sort of thing in the world. And the antithesis of like the Jason Bourne thing, where Jason Bourne went to go and like, as the redeemer, or, to go balance the scales of what had happened to him. So anyway, that was my story.
You said a bunch of stuff. So there's a couple things I want to say here before we sort of wrap the hour and move into the patron segment. So first of all, I did used to work in Bethesda, and it is a very interesting place, right? For sure. It's definitely, I found that like when I would take the bus from where my sister lived in Washington, D.C., to Bethesda to go to work, there was definitely that feeling of crossing from one place into another place, right? And that this happens every day for people who work in Washington. Very powerful people live there, in like Bethesda, Chevy Chase, all those places that are sort of in a line there. And there's this crossing over that occurs in almost like a ritualistic type of fashion, like almost like you're entering like the membrane, you're entering the dome, and then you're exiting the dome. And there's like a different set of like reality and physics and the way things go as you move between the spaces, right? So it is an interesting spot, but I wanted to hit it again. So you have a gentleman who did the work he did, who's also very fixated on reproductive abortion. So we're getting into eugenics kinds of stuff, right? He seems very like focused on that. You mentioned how the commercials would play in the same order, right? Like, so psychic driving. So we have this topic that's being focused on, and then we're having Pavlovian reaffirmation in specific segments. So we're talking you and Cameron in psychic driving right now, for sure, which I'm sure you and Cameron was a colleague and a friend.
And let me just pause. Let me just like interject real quick. Like, the irony of the man, like seeing him being the receiver of that, where at one point it probably would have been the other way around. That's what was so fascinating to me, but go on.
Well, all of these people who do mind control are susceptible to it themselves. Generally, they are under it. It's almost like, it's part of the compartmentalization. Like the same techniques that are being used on their subjects were used on them for a slightly different reason, right? It's just like layers in a cake. It's
exactly
like multi-level marketing or whatever. But this what you're talking about. So it's very like the relationship, if you watch Fringe, between Olivia and Walter is basically, he did MK Ultra on her when she was a kid. And then as an adult, he's in a mental institution, and she has to sign him out of the mental institution and take responsibility for him. And he's the person who has the knowledge to help her unlock these cases that she is working on, that also solves the mystery of who and what she is, right? So the relationship, I mean, oftentimes I think they did an amazing job in Fringe of demonstrating this sort of subject handler type of relationship in a variety of directions. But you see a person who is very scientifically minded and on a quest for information and on a quest for progress, right? Who sees what they're doing in a specific way and can't see other ways that it can be perceived by the person they're doing it to or by everyone else around. They are very single-minded on like discovering new things, right? And oftentimes, and this is different than how it's sort of portrayed to us in certain iterations of the propaganda we're exposed to, a lot of these scientists or handlers are actually quite enamored of their subjects. They do not despise them like we're led to believe in certain iterations of the information. Right. They're enamored of that, like, oh my God, when this person is around, this thing happens. Like, and they become very, right? They're very fond of their subject. But there's this sort of interesting, the relationship between Walter Bishop and Olivia in that show is fascinating to watch the dynamics and how it develops over time. But it all comes down to sort of what we're talking about here, which is genetics and location and vibration and creativity and imagination. Like the number of ideas that Walter could come up with as to ways of solving problems was like amazing, right? But he didn't have the proper, he couldn't, he would take all his medicine, like he would try every drug that he was going to give to someone else. So in that sense, he was ethical, right? But he didn't have like whatever the gas was that Olivia had to like drive the ship, right? Kind of thing. So these relationships are fascinating to look at. And I think it's entirely possible that a lot of people who worked on a lot of stuff like really had only one set of knowledge of what they were doing, right? And so when the work is over and at the end of the day, and he's focused on this abortion thing, right? Like, I don't even think he completely understands its relationship to what it was he was doing. He just knows he has to care about it because like that's part of his program, right? So I think it's pretty interesting. Yeah, but I mean, you look at his thing. I mean, the other thing I wanted to say about Maryland and this location with John Lilly and Groff and whatnot, right? You're aware that psychedelics are decriminalized in Washington, D.C. Are you aware of that?
Okay. I mean, I guess I just thought they were decriminalized everywhere, but I don't know.
No,
I've always treated them that way.
Right. But in terms of like, there are
like the actual legality, but okay. So, and in Maryland, I'm assuming they're not. So like there's some place, are you implying that it's special to go to Washington, D.C.? Like
what's fascinating to me is like, there's certain cities, there's certain areas where it seems to be, there's a much bigger push for decriminalization of, like, let's just forget about marijuana for right now, because I think that it's a different thing you have going on with marijuana than with the other psychedelics. Okay. But the cities where there's been a big push for decriminalization, Portland, Oakland, a few others like Denver, those make sense in terms of like the kind of people that are attracted to those places and sort of the hippiness of the locations or the countercultureness of the locations. One wouldn't think that Washington, D.C. Has the same profile as those places. But this push for decriminalization, to me, reveals a couple of things about Washington, D.C. First of all, that who we think of as our straight and narrows may not be the same person at night that they are during the day, right? In terms of like we understand politicians are corrupt, right? But we sometimes think, we would imagine that after they sign their corrupt deals, they're just going and drinking whiskey and smoking cigars. That may not be the case. They may be into some of this other stuff, and they may be into some stuff that's like far weirder than what most people can conceive of. But also, so there's that. But also, I'm of the strong belief that there is some kind of network that one gets signed into once they've done a psychedelic. And once you're a part of that network, you're always part of it. And I think it's useful in aspects of like psychic spying or trying to transmit information without having to use technology or whatnot between people, and sometimes even out of their awareness, right? So I think that this is, they would love it for all of these people working in Washington to be on psychedelics, because this is like a layer of surveillance and a layer of like penetration that you can't even achieve with the devices, right? And so
Right.
all these people who are staffers in Washington running around microdosing, right? That's a lot of people signed on to a network offering up a lot of information about a lot of details and minutia, right? And people are pretty keen, people are pretty hip and wise at this point to the level of surveillance that goes on technologically, but the general public is nowhere near ready to understand that there's such thing as psychedelic surveillance.
Wow. Yes.
And I'm telling you, that's like a big part of what's going on with the insanity of the politics right now, is that people don't understand who has access to their files. Let's just put it that way.
You have access to your files, right?
All right. Let's anything else you want to say before we wrap it up and move over to the supporter segment?
That's about it. I'm slowly like doing sessions with people one-on-one again. So if anyone's interested, they can email me, but that's about it.
All right. Move on over to patreon.com/offplanetmedia, projectkids.locals.com, or rockfin.com/Emily Moyer, and we will see you on the other side.